Good evening. My name is Captain Mule. I'm with the Anytown Police Department. It's about 9 p.m., and I just heard a call for assistance come over the radio involving one of our officers. He claims that he's been involved in an officer-involved shooting at a residence where he got called to help with someone who was ODing on narcotics. During that interaction, he was attacked and had to resort to deadly force on one of the people that was in the house. Now, I'm going to respond there immediately, and I'm going to assume command. However, while I'm on the way from headquarters, I will do some specific things. I'm going to make sure that I notify our chief as well as the county prosecutor's office, since this is a officer-involved shooting, and I will notify the Attorney General's office so that they can send their shooting response team. I will notify our internal affairs investigators so that they can respond and assist with the investigation. And then I was also going to assign a lieutenant to respond to a second scene. Apparently, there's a missing Alzheimer's patient, and there's a very emotional daughter of that person who called to seek our assistance. So I'm going to make sure that the county prosecutor's office also notifies the missing person unit at the prosecutor's office so that they can respond there and provide their assistance as well. I'm also going to make sure that we contact the New Jersey State Police and request their assistance with the missing person, and also to notify the Regional Operations and Information Center so that they can provide some intelligence and help with notifications and dissemination of the information for both of these incidents as well. I'm going to just tell you right now, in both of these instances, I'm going to use an authoritative style of leadership because time is of the essence, and I'm also going to make sure that I assign the most competent employee to the most critical tasks, regardless of their rank. I'm going to also determine, I'm going to make sure that I'll determine how many units should be responding to each one of these two incidents. I'll split my forces, but I'll do it in proportion to their necessity, and make sure that there's a lieutenant assigned to each one of those scenes so that they can provide their leadership and report directly to me. Now, when I arrive at the scene, I'm going to make sure that I set an inner and outer perimeter for both scenes, especially at the shooting scene. Now, the inner perimeter will allow the initial responding officers and investigators the opportunity to basically work the scene, while the outer perimeter will provide a buffer zone between the public and that inner perimeter. I'll make sure that I assign a complement of traffic officers on that outer perimeter so that we can push the citizens in a different direction away from these scenes, and also to make sure that we don't screw up traffic too badly. I'm also going to activate the ICS protocol. And what the ICS protocol does is gives me more resources than I would normally have access to, also provides for a unity of command for those resources, and it allows for improved communications through the use of common terminology. ICS is about interoperability, and that's going to be very important since we have a lot of moving parts with both of these scenes. I'm going to also establish a command post. Now, I'm going to make sure that I assign one officer per incident to serve as a scribe so we can document all the actions that we're taking, and then it'll help us to critique ourselves later on, as well as two officers to handle communications. One will handle radio communications, the other will handle telephone communications. That will allow me to focus on the task at hand. I'm going to also make sure that I request the commanders from all of the responding resources to come to the command post so that they can provide me with direct information that will help me in making my command decisions, as well as disseminating communications back to their resources so that we can make sure that we get things done quickly. I'm going to also determine where a staging area can be set up, and I'm going to make sure that it's large enough to receive all of the different resources that are going to be heading our way. I'll assign a public information officer to the staging area and a separate area for the media, and I'll make sure that he interacts with the media for both of the incidents, trying to help us to push people away from the shooting scene, and then also to send a description of the missing person out via social media messages. I'll make sure that he tries to make a partnership with the media, but only release information in strict compliance with Executive Order 69. I'm going to make sure that I request mutual aid from our surrounding towns and from our county police forces, and make a full recall of all of our sworn officers, because I think that we're going to need a lot of bodies here. And I'm also going to utilize all of our auxiliary officers. I'll also make sure that responding officers activate their body-worn cameras and keep them rolling until ordered to do otherwise by a county prosecutor or their designee. I'm going to notify all of our partners who are out there, such as UPS, United States Mail Carriers, Port Authority Police, and the Fire Department, because I want to multiply my forces in looking for the missing person. I'm going to determine if a silver alert is necessary, and then I'm going to notify the New Jersey State Police Missing Persons Unit to begin that process. I'm going to make sure that the shooting scene is processed by investigators and that all evidence is retrieved and tagged into evidence. I'll make sure that there's also a video documentation of that scene. I'll also notify our narcotics division so that they can respond and begin an investigation into the narcotics angle that occurred. Apparently there was a lot of narcotics found at this address, so we want to make sure that they're involved in this investigation as well. Now, I'll make sure that that there's a proper notification made should the suspect die who was shot by Officer Anderson. If I do have to effect that, I'll make sure that at least 2 officers do that notification and that at least one of them is in uniform. I'm also going to utilize the public information officer to send social media messages about the area to avoid and the description of the missing person. I'm going to hold a preliminary press conference with the media so that we can give them the information, and I'm going to try and establish trust with them because they can be very helpful if they're on our side. So I'll try and do that, and I'm going to make sure that I'm aware of and respectful of whatever kind of deadlines that they have to meet. Now, the question was asked, did Officer Anderson act appropriately in this situation? Yes, clearly. Officer Anderson was called to the scene to render aid because a person there was overdosing. There was no illegal entry. The officer then administered Narcan to the person who was ODing, and he did not initiate any kind of confrontation with Mr. Bloom. The report is that Mr. Bloom, elevated or escalated the situation when he attacked the officer. The officer used appropriate force to combat the force that was used against him. Now let's remember, lethal force must only be used as a last resort and after all other options have been exhausted. Bloom advancing on Officer Anderson with a knife, definitely placed Officer Anderson's life in jeopardy of serious bodily harm or death. So using deadly force was in fact authorized in this situation. However, we'll make sure that we do a complete investigation into it, and if there's any irregularities, we will investigate that thoroughly and come to the appropriate conclusion. Now, there's many people in the neighborhood that are reacting to this and are very upset by the whole set of circumstances, so we're going to make sure that we address them as well. The question is, how will I handle the concerns from the neighborhood? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign the records lieutenant to collect all reports about any narcotics activities in the area. I'm going to make sure that all those reports are forwarded to me so that I can review them in preparation of a meeting. I'll also meet with our narcotics commanders, and I'm going to determine if there's any ongoing investigations and provide whatever intelligence he can give me, and in return, I can give him, so that we coordinate, the information and we're both aware of what's going on. I'm going to increase patrols in that area, and I'm going to make sure that my lieutenants in patrol are provided roll call training so that we can focus attention on the affected neighborhood. I'm going to also call for a community meeting because I want to address the residents and provide them with a contact person should they have any information about narcotics or any other situation that might be happening. I want to give them a number that they can call and a name so that they can put a face to their name and provide that information. I want to establish communication back and forth between the police department and the citizens so that we can definitely try and fix this problem. I'm going to make sure that I set up surveillance in the area, and I'm also going to place surveillance cameras in strategic locations so that we can observe firsthand if any complaints are justified. I'll also try and partner with any of the citizens who have Ring doorbells or any kind of surveillance cameras, and that they can provide us with them, because it's much better to see firsthand who the players are so that we can investigate those people thoroughly. I'm going to also establish a block watch and maybe establish a neighborhood helpline so that we can collect yet more information and intelligence. Once we have all this intelligence, I'm going to make sure that we aggressively pursue any narcotics dealers, making sure that we do so, with all Fourth Amendment rights, search and seizure policies enforced. And I'll make sure that I disseminate that policy to all the officers involved so that they're aware of it before we actually launch our investigations. Now, another question pertains to any future actions that I might plan or implement. I'm going to make sure that I review all the body-worn cameras regarding the shooting and to see if there's any training issues that cropped up that we can address. I'm also going to make sure that I conduct a post-incident press conference and provide updates to, on both of the investigations that were kind of unfolding at this particular time. Again, trying to use the media to our advantage, being respectful of the job that they do. I'm going to also determine if there's any assistance that can be given to the daughter of the person who went missing. If the person was not yet found, make sure that entries were made into the NCIC computer on missing person files, file 6, and follow up with her and provide her with all of the services that are available to her. After the incident, I'm going to make sure that I write thank you letters to any assisting units that helped us out on these investigations. If there's any officers who distinguished themselves, I'll make sure that I commend them, including Officer Anderson for his heroism and performance, and I'll make sure I do that in public. If there's any officers that fell short of our expectations, I'll counsel them, but I'll make sure I do that in private. I'm also going to conduct a critical incident critique. I'll try and identify all the training issues that we can address, and I'll make sure that the training division comes up with a program to address these issues. I'm going to do an equipment status check and see what was available and what was not available and needed. I'll make sure that the response techniques are covered in the critical incident critique, making sure that tactics were used and addressing all that. And when the report is finished, I'll make sure that I publish it and then disseminate it to all the key stakeholders. I want to make sure that Officer Anderson and any other officer also attends post-traumatic stress debriefing, and I'll make sure that I order them to do that within 24 to 72 hours after the incident. Now, in conclusion, I was asked to develop and implement a response to a situation that had many, many challenges. And in order to meet those challenges, I utilized various resources, both from within the police department and also from outside of it. I also used my education, my training, and my experience to help formulate this response, which, in my opinion, is all-encompassing. While initially my focus was on the problem itself and how I should respond to it, I also looked at some collateral issues that could have possibly contributed to the problem. The goal here is to cure the disease and not just treat the symptoms. Now, I also understand that anytime there is a major operation that is executed, or if there's any kind of serious situation that develops, you have to consider training. Training is a fundamental tool that the police department must use. Therefore, I ordered a full review of the entire department, utilizing my entire command staff so that they can try and identify any training goals that can help us address any of our deficiencies. I will make sure that this training program is implemented, and I will monitor it for its effectiveness. If I determine that anything should be changed, I'll make sure those changes are made and then monitor those changes as well. The key is to reevaluate continuously. This way you ensure that department goals are being met. I'm proud of the job that my team here, and lastly, I'll make sure that I meet with the key stakeholders so that I can obtain their feedback on their take of my handling of this situation. I'd like to hear what they have to say. Finally, I'd like to thank you and offer you a time and a date when we can have a follow-up meeting about any of these issues.